As I walk around Gigantea, I feel cut down to size, a dwarf in the presence of the work of giants.
What if the story of human history is missing its most extraordinary chapter? Graham Hancock believes ancient people were navigating oceans and mapping the world.
Archaeologists wouldn't argue that the Egyptians had boats. It's the notion of a global navigating culture.
Long before history says they could. He points to forgotten maps, like one that shows Antarctica without ice.
In 1513, when Piri Reis drew the map, Antarctica had not been discovered.
As clues to a lost civilization with advanced knowledge. Join us as we explore the evidence gathered in Graham Hancock's 30-year journey to uncover the lost chapter of our past. Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock is a British writer and researcher who became famous for challenging what we've been told about ancient history. But before he got into all that, he was just a regular journalist. In the early part of his career, Hancock wrote for well-known newspapers and magazines. He covered real-world events like politics and economics, especially in Africa and Asia. But during those travels, something caught his attention. Ruins, legends, and old monuments that didn't seem to match the official version of history.
I think when we look at a civilization and what it is and what it's achieving and why it's so special.
By the late 1980s and early 1990s, he began asking bigger questions. How could ancient people have built giant stone structures with such precision? Why do so many different cultures, who never met, share the same stories about floods and lost lands? These questions drove him to leave journalism behind and go fully into ancient mysteries.
The fact is, all we know at the moment is that there's this huge cavity inside the pyramid that nobody has yet got into, and it isn't the only part of the pyramid.
His most famous book, Fingerprints of the Gods, came out in the mid-1990s and became a global hit. In it, Hancock suggested that there was once a highly advanced civilization that lived many thousands of years ago, long before the rise of Egypt or Mesopotamia. He believed this lost civilization was destroyed by a massive global disaster and that the survivors passed down their knowledge to later cultures. Unlike many scholars who use technical words and write only for other experts, Hancock has a style that everyday readers understand. He explains big ideas in a way that feels like a story, not a textbook.
My view is the ancient world had the right attitude to this kind of thing, and the modern world does not.
That's one reason his books have reached millions of people around the world. His writing mixes real research with adventure, travel, and mystery, making readers feel like they're on a journey with him. In addition to writing books, Graham Hancock has appeared in numerous documentaries and interviews. His latest major project, Ancient Apocalypse, aired on Netflix and brought his ideas to a global audience. In the series, he visits ancient sites around the world, presenting his theory that human history is far older and more complex than mainstream accounts suggest.
We are standing in front of an extraordinary mural, which is quite difficult for me to interpret.
The show reignited debates between Hancock and academic experts, many of whom strongly reject his interpretations. But Hancock makes it clear he's not seeking academic approval or awards. His work is aimed at the general public. He encourages people to question established narratives and examine the evidence with open minds. The mystery of Antarctica. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest place on Earth. Today, it is completely covered by a thick sheet of ice. In some places, this ice is more than 2 miles deep. Scientists say this ice has been there for at least 12,000 years. That means, for all of recorded history, no human has ever seen the land underneath the ice.
So this iceberg is absolutely ginormous. It's 5 times the New York City land area and 1,000 feet deep.
Because it has always been frozen solid. But here's where things get strange. If Antarctica has been frozen for so long, then how could anyone in ancient times know what the land underneath looks like? Nobody had satellites back then. Nobody had airplanes. Even compasses and simple maps didn't exist for most of ancient history. So the idea that any ancient map could show the coastline of Antarctica before it was covered in ice seems impossible. Scientists believe the last time Antarctica was free of ice was around the end of the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago.
Time when Antarctica was lush and green. The question is, was it lush and green during the lifetime of the human species?
Yes.
Back then, the world was going through big changes. temperatures were rising, and huge ice sheets in North America and Europe were melting. Sea levels went up by hundreds of feet, and many animals and possibly even whole civilizations may have been wiped out. Now think about this. If someone made a map of Antarctica when it was still ice-free, they would have had to live before all this happened. That means they would have to belong to a very old, advanced civilization, one that had the ability to explore faraway lands and measure coastlines with great skill. But that doesn't fit with what we've been taught. According to most history books, human beings were still living in simple tribes back then. We were hunters and gatherers. We didn't have big cities or ships that could cross oceans, and we definitely didn't have the tools to map out the hidden shape of a frozen continent on the bottom of the Earth. This is why the mystery of Antarctica is so powerful. If there really is a map showing the land under the ice, it suggests something is missing from our history. It means there could have been a lost civilization. Scientists who believe only in the official timeline say there's no way anyone could have known what Antarctica looked like 12,000 years ago. But researchers like Graham Hancock believe that this question is too important to ignore. They ask, what if we've misunderstood the timeline of human history? And what if someone really did see Antarctica before it froze?
I was very interested in Antarctica, and I was interested in it because of the work of a previous researcher called Charles Hapgood.
The mystery deepens when you learn that many old legends around the world speak of a great flood or a world-changing disaster that wiped out an earlier age. This part of the mystery, why and how Antarctica was ever mapped ice-free, is one of the biggest questions Hancock has spent decades exploring. The Peary Race Map. One of the strangest and most talked about old maps in the world is called the Peary Race Map. It was drawn in the year 1513 by a man named Peary Race, who was a Turkish admiral and mapmaker. He made the map using pieces of even older maps that came from different parts of the world. Some of those source maps, he said, were hundreds or even thousands of years old. The Peary Race Map is famous for one shocking reason. It appears to show the coastline of Antarctica without ice. This is a big deal because modern scientists agree that Antarctica has been buried under thick ice for more than 12,000 years.
Antarctica is the last frontier. Old maps that said, "Here be monsters."
So, if the Peary Race Map really shows the land under that ice, it means someone knew what Antarctica looked like before it froze, long before our modern history began. Now let's break this down. The map mainly shows parts of Europe, Africa, and South America. But down near the bottom of the map, there's a piece of land that looks almost exactly like the northern coast of Antarctica. And it doesn't just look a little similar. It has detailed shapes and curves that match what we now know from radar scans that can see through the ice. That land wasn't officially discovered until the early 1800s, nearly 300 years after Peary Race made his map. Even more shocking is that back in 1513, people didn't even know Antarctica existed. It wasn't on any other known maps at the time. So how did Peary Race include it on his map, and how did he get it right? The answer, according to Peary Race himself, is that he copied parts of his map from much older charts. He wrote notes on the side of the map saying that the earlier maps he used came from ancient times, including some that may have been drawn by people from the time of Alexander the Great. That would place those maps at more than 2,000 years old.
Also, world maps of this time typically would be adapted to suit the needs of nations who made them, so...
But if Antarctica has been frozen for over 12,000 years, even that isn't old enough. This is where the mystery grows even deeper. In the 1950s, a team of experts from the United States Air Force looked at the Peary Race Map. They were amazed by how accurate the map was, especially when it came to the shape of the land underneath Antarctica's ice. These experts used modern tools and data, like seismic surveys and radar mapping, to compare the ancient map to the real thing. What they found shocked them. The coastline on the Peary Race Map matched the real shape of Antarctica under all that ice. One of the main people who helped bring this mystery to the public was Charles Hapgood, a researcher who believed in lost knowledge from ancient times. He wrote to the United States government about the map, and even Albert Einstein showed interest in Hapgood's work. Hapgood believed that the Peary Race Map might be evidence of an ancient, advanced civilization that had the skills to explore the world long before history books say it was possible. Still, not everyone agrees. Some historians say the land on the map is just a strange drawing of South America stretched out too far. Others think the match with Antarctica is just a coincidence, but the details and placement on the map make it hard to explain away. Here's the real question. How did an old map from over 500 years ago show parts of the world that weren't officially discovered yet?
In 1513, when Piri Reis drew the map, Antarctica had not been discovered.
And show them with such accuracy. No matter what the final answer is, the Piri Reis map remains one of the most puzzling things in the world of ancient mysteries. Charles Hapgood's theory. Charles Hapgood was not a treasure hunter or a storyteller. He was a serious thinker and a professor who once taught at a college in the United States. In the 1950s, he came up with a theory that shocked many scientists, and it had everything to do with Antarctica. His idea was called Earth crust displacement. Now, that may sound complex, but let's break it down in simple terms. Imagine the outside of the Earth, its hard shell or crust, as a loose skin around an orange. Underneath that skin is a soft, hot layer that the crust floats on. Hapgood believed that sometimes this outer layer can shift all at once, like the skin on the orange moving slightly. When that happens, huge parts of the planet can slide into different places, even the polar regions. According to Hapgood, this is exactly what happened to Antarctica. He believed that thousands of years ago, Antarctica was not at the South Pole. Instead, it was located in a much warmer part of the world, where plants could grow, animals could live, and maybe even people could build cities.
This is a map by Philippe Bouache, an 18th century geographer, still a good 100 years before the discovery of Antarctica.
Then, around 12,000 years ago, the crust of the Earth suddenly shifted. This moved Antarctica into the freezing zone near the bottom of the planet. The warm land became a frozen wasteland almost overnight, buried under miles of snow and ice. This idea would explain how ancient people, or an earlier advanced civilization, might have known what Antarctica looked like without ice. If people were living or exploring there before the crust shifted, they could have made maps of its coastline. Then, when the disaster struck and the land froze over, all memory of it was lost, except maybe in legends, old stories, and ancient maps like the Piri Reis map. Hapgood didn't come to this conclusion alone. He studied ancient maps and geological evidence. He noticed that many ancient maps seemed to be based on a shared source that no longer exists, something old and accurate. He also looked at ice core samples, which are long tubes of ice drilled out of glaciers. These samples help scientists understand how the climate changed over time. Some of the data suggested that there had been rapid freezing in the past, which Hapgood thought could support his theory. He published his ideas in a book called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, where he explained how certain old maps showed parts of the world that were supposedly unknown at the time they were drawn.
It's that precise projection that we find on this 1513 map.
He argued that these maps were copies of older, advanced maps made by a civilization that no longer exists. Although most scientists at the time rejected Hapgood's theory, he still gained the attention of some very important people. One of them was Albert Einstein. Einstein even wrote a foreword to Hapgood's book. In it, Einstein said the idea of Earth crust displacement was interesting and deserved to be looked at more closely.
Albert Einstein continues to fascinate us with his brilliance.
That support gave Hapgood's theory more attention, even though it was still considered controversial. Years later, Graham Hancock picked up Hapgood's work and took it even further. Hancock believes that Hapgood was on the right track, that a great shift in the Earth's crust changed the world forever, hiding the ruins of an ancient culture under thick ice. Hapgood's Earth crust displacement theory is not accepted by most geologists today. Modern science believes in a slower process called plate tectonics, where the continents move very slowly over millions of years. But Hapgood's theory is still discussed by researchers who are open to the idea that something dramatic happened around 12,000 years ago. Hancock's 30-year journey. While many historians focus on what's already written in books, Hancock goes to the places that books often ignore. He wants to find out if a forgotten, advanced civilization once walked the Earth, long before the first known empires. His 30 years journey has taken him to every corner of the globe. In Egypt, Hancock explored the ancient pyramids and the Sphinx.
is the subterranean chamber, which is 100 feet vertically beneath the base of the Great Pyramid.
He asked questions that many others didn't. For example, could the weathering on the Sphinx have been caused by heavy rainfall, something that hasn't happened in that part of the world for thousands of years? If so, then maybe the Sphinx is much older than what most experts believe. That kind of thinking has led Hancock to believe that there's a hidden layer of history beneath the surface. From there, he went to South America. In Peru, he visited sites like Machu Picchu and the huge stone walls at Sacsayhuaman. These walls are made of stones so large that even today's machines would struggle to move them. Yet, ancient people somehow carved, moved, and fit them together without any cement. Hancock believes these stoneworks might be leftovers from an earlier civilization that had knowledge we don't understand. In Bolivia, he explored the ruins of Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. At Pumapunku, there are stone blocks with sharp angles and perfect lines, almost like they were made by machines. But these stones are thousands of years old, and the people who lived there were supposed to be simple farmers with no advanced tools. This made Hancock wonder, were they the ones who built it, or did they inherit it from someone else? Hancock also traveled to Turkey, where he visited a place called Göbekli Tepe. This site is one of the most important discoveries in modern archaeology.
Dating that we assign to all megalithic sites.
It is over 11,000 years old, which means it was built thousands of years before the first known cities. The site has massive stone pillars arranged in circles, some of them weighing more than 10 tons. These stones have carvings of animals and strange symbols that seem to tell a story. According to Hancock, this site is proof that advanced people were building huge structures long before we thought they could. But Hancock didn't just look at dry land. He also explored underwater ruins. Near the coast of Japan, divers found large stone formations under the sea near Yonaguni Island. These formations look like steps, walls, and even temples. Mainstream experts say they are natural rock shapes, but Hancock believes they could be the remains of a lost city that sank during the last ice age, when sea levels rose and swallowed coastal lands. All these places, from Egypt to South America to Asia, seem to have one thing in common. They carry clues of a time before known history. Hancock sees repeating patterns, huge stone blocks, advanced knowledge of astronomy, and myths of floods and lost cities. He believes these patterns are not just coincidence. To him, they are the footprints of a global civilization that was wiped out by a great disaster 12,000 years ago. Connections to Atlantis. One of the most interesting parts of Graham Hancock's research is how he connects everything he's found to the legend of Atlantis. This is not just some made-up story in his mind. The idea of Atlantis has been around for more than 2,000 years, and it first came from a man named Plato, one of the most well-known thinkers from ancient Greece. Plato wrote about Atlantis in 2 of his books, Timaeus and Critias. He said Atlantis was a great and powerful civilization that lived over 9,000 years before his own time.
The strange thing is that despite being buried beneath deep waters,
That means Atlantis would have existed more than 11,000 years ago, right around the time Hancock believes a lost advanced civilization was wiped out by a huge disaster. According to Plato, Atlantis was a rich land with beautiful cities, canals, and temples. The people of Atlantis were smart and skilled. They had ships, trade routes, and technology that was very advanced for their time. But then, in a single day and night, Atlantis was destroyed by floods and earthquakes, sinking into the sea and disappearing forever. Most historians today believe that Plato's story was just a tale to teach a lesson. But Hancock thinks there may be some truth hidden in that old story.
The story of Atlantis comes down to us from Plato. It's expressed in 2 dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias.
He points out that the time frame Plato gave, more than 11,000 years ago, matches the end of the last ice age. That was a time of major flooding, melting ice, and rising sea levels. It is very possible that cities and whole coastlines were swallowed by the ocean back then. Hancock also says that the story of a great flood is not just found in Greece. Almost every culture around the world has a flood myth. In the Bible, there is the story of Noah's Ark. In ancient Mesopotamia, there is the tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In India, there is the story of Manu. In Native American, African, and even Asian stories, there are warnings of great floods that wiped out entire groups of people. Hancock believes these shared stories are not random. They may be different versions of the same real event. Hancock doesn't say that Atlantis was exactly how Plato described it, with flying ships or magical crystals.
Archaeologists roll their eyes at any mention of Atlantis. If you even say the word Atlantis,
Right.
you're automatically regarded as a member of the lunatic fringe.
But he does believe that there was once a great civilization that lived during the last ice age, and that it may have inspired the story of Atlantis. He says this lost civilization could have been the mother culture that passed down ideas, skills, and stories to later groups like the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and the Mayans. One of the strongest parts of Hancock's argument is the timing. Plato said Atlantis was destroyed around 11,600 years ago. That is almost the exact same time when scientists say a major climate event called the Younger Dryas took place. During this time, temperatures dropped suddenly, and then rose again. This caused massive flooding as ice sheets melted quickly. Sea levels rose by hundreds of feet. Entire coastal areas would have vanished underwater. So, when Hancock connects the fall of Atlantis to this timeline, it raises a big question. What if the story of Atlantis was not just a myth, but a memory of something real that happened a very long time ago? Hancock believes the answers are not just in books, but in the land, the sea, and the stars. He says the ruins, the ancient maps, the flood stories, and even the placement of ancient buildings are all clues pointing back to Atlantis, or something like it. He believes that if we keep digging, we might one day find solid proof that an advanced world existed long before recorded history. Why the mainstream rejects it. Even though many people around the world find Graham Hancock's ideas exciting and eye-opening, most experts in history and science do not agree with him. In fact, many of them have strongly pushed back against his theories. They say his work is not based on facts in the way that proper science or archaeology should be. So why does the mainstream world of history, archaeology, and science reject what Hancock has spent over 30 years trying to prove? First, most of what Hancock says goes against what is taught in schools and universities. Historians and archaeologists have spent more than 100 years digging up old sites, studying bones, pottery, and ancient writings.
And what the process of history and archaeology should really be about is a process of remembering.
Over time, they have built a timeline of human history that shows how people slowly went from hunting and gathering to farming, and then later to building towns, cities, and finally, civilizations. They believe this process took thousands of years. Hancock, however, believes there was already a powerful civilization long before this timeline even begins. This upsets many experts because it would mean everything they have taught or published might be wrong or incomplete. Second, mainstream scholars say that Hancock does not follow the same rules that scientists and archaeologists must follow. When scientists make a claim, they are expected to show proof that can be tested, studied, and repeated. This is called the scientific method, but Hancock often uses stories, old myths, ancient maps, and strange carvings as his main sources. While these things are interesting, experts say they are not strong enough proof to change what we know about history. For example, when Hancock talks about maps showing Antarctica without ice or massive stone ruins that seem too advanced for ancient people, experts say he is looking at things in a way that fits his theory, instead of testing all possible explanations. In their view, he starts with a belief that there was a lost civilization, and then tries to find anything that supports that belief, even if the evidence is weak or unclear. This is the opposite of how science usually works, where you start with facts and let the facts guide your conclusion. Third, many critics say that Hancock mixes facts with guesses. They say he often takes a small piece of real information and adds a big, bold theory to it without solid proof. For instance, he might point to a strange carving on a temple wall and say it shows knowledge of space or stars, but other experts might say it's just art or religious symbols. Because of this, many people in the academic world call his work pseudoscience, which means something that sounds scientific but does not follow true scientific rules. Fourth, some historians believe that Hancock's ideas could be harmful.
Historians and archaeologists say that, the Greeks were amongst the first to create geometry, but clearly we have to reconsider that view.
They say that giving credit for amazing old buildings or knowledge to a lost, advanced civilization might take away from the real people who built them. For example, if we say the ancient Egyptians or the people of South America could not have made the pyramids or stone temples on their own, it may sound like we are saying they were not smart or skilled enough, which is not true. Many of these people had great knowledge in math, astronomy, and engineering, even without modern tools. However, Hancock has responded to these critics many times. He says that mainstream experts are too stuck in their ways. He believes they are afraid of new ideas because they do not want to admit they could be wrong. He also says that many powerful schools, museums, and scientific groups control what gets taught and what gets ignored. According to him, they do not want to risk their funding, their careers, or their reputation by accepting a theory that sounds too strange or different. In some cases, Hancock has even been banned from speaking at universities or having his work included in academic journals. This has only made his supporters trust him more. They feel he is being silenced because he is getting too close to the truth. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.